Okay friends, to get started on this job, one of the first things we have to do is safely raise and support the front of the vehicle so the wheel's off the ground. After that, we're going to remove all of our lug nuts and the wheel. Now that we have the wheel off, we have a nice clear view of our lower control arm here. There's going to be 3 mounting bolts for this. There's one right here at the ball joint, which is where we're going to start. There's going to be another forward one right here that we're going to remove as well. And then there's going to be another one that's all the way in the back right here, which has a nut on the top of it. Let's start at the ball joint. To do this, I'm going to use my 18mm wrench on the bolt side, and then I'll use an 18mm socket on the nut. Remove that nut, set it aside. Something that's common to happen with these pinch bolts is that they tend to get stuck inside the knuckle. If that's the case, go ahead and spray it down with some penetrant and then use an air gun or a ratchet and just try to spin this bolt until it breaks free. Now we can carefully use a hammer and a punch and drive this right out of here. Now that we have the bolt out of there, let's continue with our chisel and a hammer. I want to get right in between the 2 ears right here. Once I get it in there, I'm just going to go ahead and separate it a little bit. I'll use my hammer to bonk this in. Once you have it separated, go ahead and spray it with some penetrant and let it sit. Now to access this front bolt right here, you could technically take off this plastic and just get it right out of your way. For me personally, the less amount of work, the better. I'm just going to go ahead and push it out of my way, and then I can remove this bolt. There we are. I did that using my 19mm socket. Now let's move to the rearward aspect of this control arm. We have our 21mm headed bolt right here. Like I said before, there's a 21mm nut right on top. I'm going to use my wrench on top. We'll go ahead and unscrew this. There we are. Slide that bolt right out of there. And grab the nut, and we'll set both of these aside. I'm going to use some cutters. I'm going to remove this right here. Remove both of these pieces. We'll set them aside. Remove your axle nut. Let's use our 32mm socket for this. Grab that. You have a washer behind there. Take that off as well. If you find that you need to use a hammer to pound this through, make sure that you put your nut on there. That way there you can protect your axle threads so they don't get damaged. Alright, now that I know it's freed up, we can move along. Now let's go ahead and push on that axle from the outer portion, and we're going to gently pull this away. As we pull it away, we want to be separating this area here. Once that's separated, let's try to give this a little tug and remove it from under here as well. Okay, that's about as far as that's going to come. Now we can drive this the rest of the way out of there. Just be very careful, because as we take this out, it could potentially fall down and or hurt you. Now that we have it out, the next thing that I always like to do is clean up all the threads on my mounting bolts. Now let's pay attention to the hole in the knuckle where the ball joint goes. I want to clean that out. I'm just going to use a bore brush and some parts cleaner. Once you have it cleaned out, let's apply a little bit of copper never seize inside the hole here, and then we're also going to do up along the wheel bearing where the axle is supposed to slide through. Okay friends, it's time to install our brand new lower control arm. Let's go ahead and take this. We're going to carefully slide it into the rearward part of the subframe right here. Once we have it so it's in there, let's go ahead and line it up with the knuckle itself as well. Just get that stud up in there a little bit. Now I'm going to give this a couple loving bonks with a rubber mallet. Once you have that in position right there, let's go ahead and grab our pinch bolt. We're going to slide this right on through. Just go ahead and start that nut on there. All right, we'll get back to this in a minute. Let's move along to this rearward aspect right here. We're going to try to get the bushing lined up so we can put our rear bolt in as well. You might need to give this a couple loving bonks with your rubber mallet to get it into place. All right, just going to get this lined up now. Put our bolt up and through there. Mounting nut, start that on there as well. Now let's move to our forward bolt. Get that into position. Take your forward bolt, which is the one with the shanked area here. Start that right in there. You might have to maneuver it around a little bit. Go ahead and start that in by hand. Before we can start snugging anything up, the next thing that we need to do is carefully put some pressure underneath the control arm to bring this up into ride height position. Now when we do this, we don't necessarily want to go right on the ball joint area here because we don't want to damage it. You also want to make sure that when you do this, the jack doesn't necessarily slide out of here. It could potentially be very dangerous for you. All right, now that I've got plenty of pressure up and underneath this, we can continue tightening up our mounting bolts. Now we can start torquing everything. I'm going to torque this pinch bolt to 60 foot-pounds. Now let's torque both of these bolts to 135 foot-pounds. Get our wrench up top there, hold that still. Get this out of here. Now let's move out here. We're going to start putting on our axle nut with the washer, of course. Now when you tighten this, you want to make sure that you tighten it down by hand and not with an air gun. You don't want to go ahead and compress the wheel bearing and damage it in any way. Now we can torque the axle nut to 181 foot-pounds. Now we can get this on here. Now we can take this locking cap, and what you want to do is make sure that you have these slots lined up with a corresponding hole in this so we can put in our locking cotter pin. Make sure you pin it over. Let's get our wheel up on here. Start on all of your lug nuts, then we'll bottom them out. Once they're bottomed out, we'll get the wheel on the ground, and then we'll torque them all to 100 foot-pounds. Torqued.